Greetings, philosophers. Today we're exploring the mind-bending paradoxes of Zeno of Elea, a Greek philosopher from the 5th century BCE whose arguments still challenge our understanding of reality. Zeno's paradoxes are like intellectual landmines, simple at first glance, but they explode into questions about motion, infinity, and the nature of existence itself. Let's unpack the dialectic of Zeno. Let's start with who Zeno was. We find ourselves in a small Greek town called Elea, now in southern Italy, around 490 BCE. Zeno was a student of Parmenides, a philosopher who argued that reality is one, unchanging, and indivisible. Parmenides thought the world of change and motion we see around us is an illusion, a trick of our senses. Zeno, fiercely loyal to his teacher, took it upon himself to defend this wild idea, but he didn't do it with flowery speeches or grand metaphors. No, Zeno was a logical sniper. He crafted paradoxes, short, sharp arguments that showed how our common-sense beliefs about motion and plurality lead to absurd conclusions. His method was so clever that some call it an early form of dialectic, a way of arguing that exposes contradictions to get at deeper truths. So, what are these paradoxes? Let's dive into the most famous ones, starting with Achilles and the tortoise. Imagine the fastest runner in Greek legend, Achilles, racing against a tortoise. The tortoise gets a head start, say 100 meters. By the time Achilles runs those 100 meters, the tortoise has crawled forward a bit, maybe 10 meters. When Achilles covers that 10 meters, the tortoise has moved another meter, and so on forever. Each time Achilles reaches where the tortoise was, the tortoise has advanced a tiny bit more. Logically, it seems Achilles can never catch up, because there's always another tiny distance to cover. But we know Achilles would zoom past the tortoise in seconds. So, what's going on here? Zeno's saying that if space and time are infinitely divisible, motion becomes impossible. It's a paradox that makes you question whether motion is even real. Then there's the dichotomy paradox. Suppose you want to walk across a room. To get there, you first have to cross half the distance, then half of what's left, then half of that, and so on. You're dividing the distance into an infinite number of smaller steps. Since there are infinitely many steps, Zeno argues, you can never complete them all. You'd be stuck forever, never reaching the other side. Yet, here we are, walking across rooms every day without a second thought. Again, Zeno's point is that our assumption about space being infinitely divisible leads to a logical dead end. Another head-scratcher is the arrow paradox. Picture an arrow in flight. At any single moment in time, that arrow is frozen in one spot, right? It's not moving in that instant. If time is just a series of these frozen moments and the arrow is at rest in each one, how does it ever move? Zeno's suggesting that motion is an illusion because at every point in time, everything is static. It's like watching a movie frame by frame. Each frame is still, so where does the motion come from? There's also the stadium paradox, which gets into relative motion. Imagine two rows of objects moving past each other in opposite directions and a third row standing still. If you measure the time it takes for one row to pass another, you get weird results that seem to make time itself inconsistent. This one's a bit more technical, but it's another way Zeno messes with our assumptions about how motion and time work together. Now, you might be thinking, okay, these are clever brain teasers, but why do they matter? Great question. Zeno's paradoxes aren't just puzzles. They're a direct attack on how we understand reality. Most of us assume the world is full of separate things, chairs, trees, people, that move around in space and time. Zeno, following Parmenides, says, "Hold up. If you believe in motion and plurality, you end up with contradictions. So maybe reality isn't what you think it is." His paradoxes force us to confront the idea that what we see, motion, change, lots of stuff, might not be the ultimate truth. Maybe reality is one big unchanging whole, like Parmenides claimed. This is where Zeno's dialectic comes in. The term dialectic gets thrown around a lot in philosophy, but at its core, it's about using logical arguments to dig into contradictions and find truth. Zeno's approach is like a proto-dialectic. He takes an idea, like motion is possible, and pushes it to its logical extreme until it collapses under its own weight. It's not about proving Parmenides right necessarily, but about showing that the alternative falls apart. This method influenced later thinkers like Socrates, who used questioning to poke holes in people's beliefs, and even Hegel, whose dialectic of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis owes a debt to Zeno's knack for exposing contradictions. Let's pause for a moment and think about how wild this is. Zeno's not just playing word games, he's challenging the very foundation of how we experience the world. When you walk to the kitchen or watch a car drive by, you don't think, "Oh, this motion is logically impossible." But Zeno's saying, "Slow down. Your senses might be lying to you." That's a radical move, and it's why his paradoxes have stuck around for over 2 millennia. So, how do we make sense of these paradoxes? Let's look at how philosophers and mathematicians have tackled them. First up, Aristotle, the big brain of ancient Greece. He wasn't buying Zeno's conclusions, but he took the paradoxes seriously. In his Physics, Aristotle argues that Zeno's missing the difference between potential infinity and actual infinity. Take the dichotomy paradox, dividing a distance into infinite halves. Aristotle says you can divide the distance in your mind as many times as you want, but in reality, you don't have to complete an infinite number of tasks to move. The infinity is potential, not actual. It's like saying you can always imagine a smaller slice of cake, but you don't have to eat an infinite number of slices to finish the cake. Fast forward to the 17th century, and we get a more rigorous solution with the invention of calculus by Newton and Leibniz. Calculus gives us the tools to handle infinity mathematically. In the Achilles and tortoise paradox, the distances Achilles needs to cover, 100 meters, 10 meters, 1 meter, and so on, form an infinite series. But this series converges to a finite number. If you add up all those distances, you get a total that Achilles can cover in a finite amount of time. Same with the dichotomy. The infinite series of halves adds up to 1, so you can cross the room after all. Calculus doesn't disprove Zeno's logic, it just gives us a way to describe motion that avoids the paradox. But here's the thing, solving the paradoxes mathematically doesn't fully get rid of the philosophical itch. Sure, we can calculate that Achilles catches the tortoise, but Zeno's deeper question lingers. Is motion really what we think it is? Is reality fundamentally continuous, or is it made of discrete bits? Even today, physicists grapple with these questions. In quantum mechanics, for example, space and time might not be infinitely divisible. There's something called the Planck length, below which our usual notions of space break down. Zeno's paradoxes, in a way, foreshadowed these debates about the nature of the universe. Let's zoom out and think about Zeno's impact on philosophy. His paradoxes didn't just challenge motion, they challenged how we trust our senses. Parmenides and Zeno were part of a broader shift in Greek thought, where philosophers started prioritizing reason over observation. Before them, people looked at the world and said, well, things move, so motion must be real. Zeno flips that on its head. Your eyes say motion is real, but logic says it's impossible. Who do you trust? This tension between reason and perception is still a big deal in philosophy, whether we're talking about Descartes doubting his senses or modern debates about whether we're living in a simulation. Zeno's dialectic also set the stage for later philosophical methods. In Plato's dialogues, Socrates uses a kind of questioning that feels Zeno-esque, pushing people to define their terms and then showing how those definitions fall apart. Plato even gives Zeno a shout-out in his dialogue Parmenides, where Zeno appears as a character explaining his paradoxes. He says he wrote them to defend Parmenides against people who mock the idea of a single, unchanging reality. Zeno's like, you think the world is full of moving things? Let me show you why that idea doesn't hold up. Before we wrap up, let's think about what Zeno's paradoxes mean for us, not just as philosophers or math nerds, but as people living in the world. When you hear about Achilles and the tortoise, it's tempting to shrug and say, well, I know motion happens, so Zeno's wrong. But that misses the point. Zeno's not trying to trick you, he's inviting you to question your assumptions. Every day we take for granted that the world works a certain way. We trust our senses, our routines, our basic ideas about time and space. Zeno's like that friend who asks, but why? Over and over until you realize you don't have a good answer. His paradoxes also remind us that infinity is a tricky concept. We throw around the word infinite like it's no big deal, but Zeno shows how it can unravel our understanding of something as simple as walking across a room. That's humbling. It's a reminder that the universe might be weirder than we can grasp, and that's okay. Philosophy at its best doesn't always give answers. It gives us better questions. Thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed this dive into Zeno's paradoxes, share your thoughts in the comments and let me know what philosophical topic you want to explore next. Until then, keep questioning, keep wondering, and I'll catch you in the next episode.